7 Things You Never Knew About the Founding Fathers. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the well-oiled mind, where we dive into the dusty corners of history and bring back the juiciest, quirkiest stories. Today, we're serving up 7 things you never knew about the Founding Fathers. Spoiler alert, these guys were full of surprises. And yes, powdered wigs were just the beginning. Point 1. The phrase Founding Fathers wasn't even a thing until the 20th century. Here's the first shocker. The sage men who signed the Constitution wouldn't even recognize the term Founding Fathers. That phrase? Total fake news if you lived in 1776. It was actually coined much later by the 29th President Warren G. Harding in 1916. He issued the phrase during a speech celebrating the Constitution's anniversary. So, when we call them the Founding Fathers, they'd probably just blink and say, "Who's that?" This name makes these progenitors of the nation sound totally unified, but that's not totally accurate. There were at least 3 mavericks out there. Point 2. The Constitution's Rebel Trio. Now imagine this. The Constitution gets rolled out, and it's a beauty. I mean, the penmanship is sick. But 3 guys straight up refuse to sign it. Yes, you heard that correctly. They refused to put their John Hancock next to John Hancock. We're talking about George Mason, Evan Randolph, and Elbridge Gerry. And yes, Gerry is the Jerry of gerrymandering infamy. But that's a different story. George Mason raised up and was like, no Bill of Rights, no deal. Randolph had concerns about too much centralized power, and Gerry, well, he thought the patriotic parchment just didn't have enough protections for individual freedoms. So, these 3 intrepid men swiped left on history's most famous document. Talk about gutsy. Point 3. George Washington, the school dropout. Now for the guy whose face is literally on the dollar bill. Fun fact, George Washington wasn't a college graduate, and he couldn't even blame COVID. Unlike Jefferson, Adams, and the rest of the brainy boys who became the bane of the British, Washington's boot leather never graced the marble steps of a university's hallowed halls. He was mostly self-taught and probably too busy surveying land and chopping down cherry trees to even care. The 18th century was a bit more rough and tumble than the 21st. Nevertheless, Papa George still managed to become commander-in-chief. Not once, but twice. Not too shabby. Point 4. Jeffersons Books. It's not just broke college kids who sell them. Speaking of Jefferson, let's talk about his massive book collection. In an age before selling your plasma was a thing, people strapped for cash had to look elsewhere. TJ had so many books that, when he hit financial trouble, he sold over 6,000 of them to the government. These books formed the foundation of what we now know as the Library of Congress. So, if you've ever enjoyed a quiet afternoon there, you have Jefferson's shopping addiction to thank. Point 5. The Hamilton's Dueling Curse. Here's one for the drama lovers. You probably know Alexander Hamilton died in a duel with Aaron Burr. But did you know his son, Philip, also died in a duel? Well, it's true, and there's one more wrinkle. Father and son were both pincushioned on the exact same spot in Weehawken, New Jersey, where dueling was less regulated in New York. Some things never change. Well, it's true. Philip bit the proverbial dust 3 years before his pappy. Lastly, Burr was actually the vice president at the time of the duel. It's probably best that some traditions fade away. Point 6. We the people and our dogs. Now for a touching story about Gouverneur Morris, aka the Long Cool Daddy, who wrote the preamble. This segment shows that while we hoist up the Founding Fathers as larger than life, they were similar to us in many ways, especially their humanity. On November 6th, 1816, Morris passed away, and grief-stricken, so did his beloved spaniel, whose name is lost to history. They were inseparable in life, and apparently in death too. Both were buried together that same day. Now, if that doesn't tug at your heartstrings a bit, you might be part robot. Point 7. John Adams, the original government employee. Let's talk about John Adams, who famously loathed being vice president. How much? Well, I'm glad you asked. Here's what he said. My country has in its wisdom contrived for me the most insignificant office that ever the invention of man contrived or his imagination conceived. Ouch. Clearly, Adams didn't have much patience for playing second fiddle. I mean, I can kind of see his point. And don't forget, my man didn't have complimentary and subsidized medical, dental, or even access to the thrift savings plan. Maybe brother had a point. And there you have it. 7 wild, weird, and downright obscure facts about the Founding Fathers that show they were people just like you and me. They weren't just a bunch of stiff old guys, they were rebels, bookworms, duelists, and apparently dog lovers. If you enjoyed today's video, hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments which Founding Father fact blew your mind. See you next time for more history with a twist, and remember, knowledge is its own reward.